via Zoom to Perth to catch up with the CEO of Appellon. Her name is Sue Jauncey. Sue, you've been a psychologist for the better part of 25 years, and you've done an awful lot of, I suppose, measuring behavioural and performance outputs at various organisations and businesses, not only here but around the world. Businesses as diverse as the Royal Australian Navy, I can imagine some of the work you did there, National Health Service, you've worked in England, and of course the Northern Territory health system. What are some of the things that you've learnt in that time that going forward, and of course now that we've experienced life in COVID, that our businesses, for example, and our various firms need to take on board and try and bring the workforce along with them? Because I think an awful lot of things have changed, and the one thing we've identified more than anything else is our mental health has never taken a bigger hit than it has in the last year.
Yes, George, you're very right. Look, the one thing that we have seen, which is even pre-COVID as well, it's just that COVID has accelerated the conversation, if you like. But over the last 20 to 30 years, we've also seen a rise in the level of stress and anxiety that is showing up in the workplace. And of course, that's resulting in higher numbers of stress leave that's being taken, terms of bullying and harassment and inappropriate behaviour. There's a whole range and raft of behaviours and that are happening across the workplace that is creating this higher level of stress and anxiety. And so what we are saying at the moment to the workforce is that previously we have based most of our workforce methodologies and the way that we manage workforce on management consulting models, etc., that we've had. And this needs to change, and we need to understand the science that sits behind how people, or how to keep people healthy in the workplace. But the other thing is, George, so we want to address the level of stress and anxiety in the workplace, which I'll talk to you about in a moment. But this stress and anxiety, we keep talking about well-being or productivity or performance or culture or any of these things. We talk about them differently and as specific topics. But the fact of the matter is, if we want to increase the well-being of people in the organisations and reduce levels of stress and anxiety, you've got well-being equals behaviours equals performance that we have. And these things are interactive together. They should not be separated out. But if we understand the science behind human and what sort of workforce methodologies we need to apply, then we can increase well-being, reduce stress and anxiety, have people behave in a way that is appropriate and is good for everyone and good for the purpose of the organisation and for people and well-being, which will also increase performance. So these are interactive elements that we have that we need to understand the science of how to get them to work together.
And I suppose this is what Appellon has been doing for the better part of the last 20 odd years, huh? Going into a firm and assessing the workforce and the strategies behind it, and trying to not only appease them, but educate them and educate every player within that organisation.
Well, exactly, George. And the education that we need people to understand is currently the majority of workforces are operating out of what you call, most people have heard the saying, a fight and flight state. But we want people to understand what this is about. Because we have these increased levels of stress and anxiety, we're overproducing the stress hormone cortisol that's running through our bodies that is keeping us in this fight and flight state. Now, an overproduction of cortisol impacts negatively on our immune system, our cardiovascular, and many other health issues that we have as well. Now, we've begun to normalize this overproduction of cortisol, and we've not balanced it with the production of oxytocin, which is the love hormone, and cortisol is the stress hormone. And we need a balance of these things. So we're not saying cortisol is bad. No. It is good for us, but we need to understand what is happening with the models, how we're managing workforce, and how it is impacting on the level of stress and anxiety, which is then causing the production of either good or bad hormones, which creates a way that we operate for survival, which depends then or will indicate whether we're going to have a toxic workplace or whether we're going to have a healthy workplace.
Now, in the times that you worked for the Royal Australian Navy at Northern Health, how long did it take you to get from the A to the N? In other words, you walked in from the day to assess the problems, and the day you walked out. What period of time are we talking about? Was it weeks? Was it months? Was it years?
Well, that's interesting question. It's a good question, George. So before I answer that one, I just want to say too, the only two things that really matter for satisfaction in a workplace, if you do a factor analysis, is lots of little factors, but all that really matters is a sense of achievement and connection. If you feel that in the workplace, and if we are over personalizing things because we have an overproduction of cortisol, then we can't get to feel the sense of achievement and connection. So if I take the NHS, one of the trusts that we just worked on in England finished that in August 19, they were in what you call special measures, which is sanctions to us over here. Crowded corridors, backlogs of films of 8,000, which meant people with cancer weren't getting their diagnosis, etc. In a state of learned helplessness, lots of cortisol that was happening, and stressed and anxious and so on. So when we went in to start working with them, some of the results are immediate in terms of when we started to apply this and they started to understand how they were acting, how they were responding, got them to work on collective achievement and connection. They started to feel a sense of relief was the first feeling, and were able to start making more decisions. Now, in the space of 6 months, they cleared their crowded corridors for the first time in 5 years.
Wow.
And felt that sense of achievement because the nurses, the consultants, the doctors, the operational people all came together and started working at their bed meetings and working together on how to improve the hospital flow from front door to back door. The 8,000 cleared, and the NHS had the radiology department. They were then presenting nationally in the United Kingdom and Wales around what it was that they did. And then within 2 years of working with us, they had walked out of special measures entirely, as was reported by the BBC. So what I'm saying to you is changing the psychology of a workforce can't happen overnight, because the human being can't take that much change on. It's building those building blocks and taking the steps. So first they feel a sense of relief, then they start making different decisions, then they start showcasing the achievements and feeling the positive reinforcement of those achievements, which gives them more energy, wanting to take more of the steps, etc., etc. Over a period of time, you see the changes like coming out of special measures altogether. But George, there is no end. If you want to become objectively wise and live in a space where we can not overproduce the cortisol and the oxytocin, becoming wise and being objectively wise, that there is no ceiling to that. We just keep discovering more. It's just layer after layer after layer. And that's where the magic lives.
Well, thank you very much for giving us the insight that you've mastered over the last quarter of a century, and also giving us a sense of just how important it is for everybody within the organisation to feel, as you say, the love, because only when they all start to feel that they're thriving will the business itself, or whatever the platform is, will lift and make those differences that it absolutely needs to in order to survive and get past the challenges that we're all facing in this modern world of ours that is surrounded by COVID. Sue Jauncey from Appellon, thank you very much for joining us and really appreciate the insight.
Thank you, George. Have a lovely day.
All the best.